Welcome to Sorting Through Life with Colleen Waterston on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I am Colleen Waterston, host, owner, and lead organizer of Space by Space Organizing here in the Twin Cities. In my business, I help people sort through their homes from bedrooms to basements, pantries to paperwork. This show is an extension of that work. If you follow home organizers on social media, you've probably seen the satisfying before and after transformations. Those are fun and can be visually glamorous, but organizing one's life is about so much more than a pretty picture. And while some organizing transformations are visually rewarding, there are many other elements of an organized life, like paperwork, that are less exciting, but no less vital. When I walk into someone's home, I don't just see clutter. I see the story of a life. I get a front row seat to someone's biggest stressors, the physical reflection of overwhelm that shows up in drawers, closets, and piles. I meet people between their best intentions and the demands of their daily life. Homes hold the comings and goings of partners, parents, and kids, friends, and coworkers. Home is where we drop everything off at the end of the day, and when there's no clear system to keep it all together, our homes can bear the brunt of our life's burdens. A messy closet often lives alongside a messy paperwork system, scattered digital files, unfinished projects, and life logistics that keep us stuck. And this is so common. We all have so many demands on our time and attention, and the stuff of life adds up quick. In this episode, we're diving into something I call the filing cabinet of life. All the paperwork, legal pieces, and behind the scenes admin that keep a life running. Having systems for all this might not be the most insta-worthy effort, but it is critical to the flow of your day to day. Not tending to it can be costly. Today, I am very excited to be launching a series focused on estate planning, to learn, to share, and to make these conversations less scary and more practical for all of us. If you've listened to this show, you know I have a thing for organizing and living with the end in mind. Just last week, my dad, a retired funeral director, was on for another segment of Dying to Get Organized, where we discussed all the most popular ways to memorialize a life through the physical body left behind. Being raised around a funeral business taught me a simple truth: we don't get out of life alive. I believe this truth can be a powerful motivator. If we know our time is finite, why not use that as fuel to clear the clutter, live our best lives, and put together practical wishes and instructions for what we would like to happen when our time here is done? I'm 39, and I started my own estate planning a couple years ago and finalized my will last year. I hope to edit the document many times for many decades to come. But there's peace in knowing that if some terrible, unforeseen circumstance took me away sooner, my loved ones will have guidance for how I want my life's assets to be managed. And even before then, if I am still living but unable to speak or think on my own behalf, that I have people I love and trust who are designated and signed off on as the spokespeople of my predetermined desires. Working on these documents was not the most exciting days spent organizing my life, but I feel good to know that the filing cabinet of my life is as tended to as the closets and drawers. I hope that by normalizing this topic in a more casual way, this show might be the push that helps you start a tough conversation with a parent, partner, or friend. This episode is one that you share when you think, maybe I should ask dad about this, or maybe this is the year I finally get my affairs in order. I am so excited to be diving into this topic with estate attorney Rachel Schromen of Schromen Law, based in St. Paul. Rachel is joining me as co host and guide through this topic. You may have heard her on AM 950 before. If so, you know she is far from just an estate attorney. Rachel is a death doula and an incredible connector in the end of life community, and someone who lives the values she teaches. Rachel helps people create dignified, thoughtful plans so that when the time comes, Families can honor their loved ones' wishes rather than get lost in confusion or conflict. Rachel's law firm, Schromen Law, has over 200 5-star reviews on Google. Who knows a lawyer that is that loved? Her clients appreciate being in Rachel and her all female team's practical and very capable hands, but also emphasize their compassion and kindness throughout the process. They describe their experience in estate planning with enthusiasm, clearly energized by getting such important documents and decisions in order. And now, for me and my lucky listeners, we get Rachel here with us. Over the next year, in this series, we'll unpack the essentials, the legal documents you need, how to choose decision makers like healthcare agents and powers of attorney. We'll get practical and we'll get candid. We'll talk about incapacity planning. What happens if you're alive but can't speak for yourself? We'll talk about trusts, wills, and learn the definition of fun things like probate. But we'll also talk about the human side, how to start conversations with parents and loved ones, how to decide what matters most to you, and how to structure things so your wishes are clear and your family isn't left guessing. My hope with this series is that you'll listen before you sit down with an attorney, and that by listening, you'll walk into those conversations feeling prepared. Today won't be every nitty gritty detail. Instead, we're starting the conversation, why this matters, how to begin, and what questions to bring to the attorney's office so you don't feel lost once you get there. So take a deep breath, maybe grab a pen and paper, and let's begin. But first, we'll take a brief break. All right, welcome back. And welcome Rachel Schromen of Schromen Law. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm so excited to have this conversation. And it's the first of 6 that we're planning on for the rest of the year. We'll go every other month. And what I'm really hoping with this is that somebody could listen to it, one at a time as we go, but really that this is a series that is just very informative, kind of demystifies some of these things and gives them tools to go to your office a lot more prepared.
Mhm.
But even if they want to call Rachel on episode 3 or after this one, go ahead. Today, I want to start. Why do you think so many people avoid estate planning? And then from there, like, what do you see are the most common emotional barriers within that avoidance?
I think most commonly, clients tend to put off estate planning partly because it's thinking about our own mortality. And I mean, you grew up in a family where you were thinking about end of life, you were confronted with end of life regularly. It was probably a common topic. I did not. I think most people would say they did not. And so it can be a topic where we don't really know how to react to some of the emotions that come up. We don't know how to have those conversations or think through it. It's just very, very uncomfortable. And to talk about estate planning is to also sit with the reality that some really intense, scary stuff can happen during our lives,
So
and
true.
inevitably we're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's that emotional block that comes up. And also, what I see is emotional blocks that aren't necessarily around end of life, but are around current family dynamic. Um, doing legal documents, I think it tends to. I mean, we try to keep it fun. We do have a lot of client reviews where they're enthusiastic. They're
And they
like,
love working with your team.
yeah, they're like, oh, we actually had a good time working through this. We're like,
Yep.
good, because doing legal documents can feel really serious and really intense, and there can almost be a finality of signing something. So I'll give kind of an example. I'll actually give it a personal example. So I think I had been practicing in estate law for a couple years, and my mom was doing her estate planning in Iowa, and she said, "Will you come down and go to the lawyer's office with me?" And I said, "Sure, yeah, I'll come to the meeting." I was going as a daughter, not as a lawyer, and
And you were practicing
I was
estate law.
practicing estate law.
Now, would you recommend not working with a family member to draft your own?
You know, every attorney kind of has, I think, their different comfort level and viewpoint on that. Now, I'm not licensed in Iowa, so I had an easy
Oh,
out to say no
yes.
to my mom. However, even if, say, my mom did live in Minnesota and was licensed here, personally, I wouldn't represent her for a number of reasons. Um, one, I want to be a daughter in that space, and there's just different, I have my own emotions that come up around it. I'll tell you a little bit about that with the meeting with the attorney we had in Iowa. But also, there can be some kind of ethical things too. I have two brothers. Uh, I ha-
Rachel gets it all.
ex-
Sign here.
exactly right,
Yeah.
right. So
Yep.
I have an interest in it. So there's
Yep.
some ethical concerns, but I know some attorneys who are perfectly comfortable working with family members, and I have a good friend who sent her mom to me. Didn't feel comfortable. She goes, I just feel like it's a little. So I went to the meeting with my mom. Now, I was working as an estate planning attorney. I went into the meeting, sobbed through the entire thing, did not expect it.
Really?
At one point, the attorney stops and goes, "S- So, how much estate planning do you do?" And I'm like, "It's all I do, okay, but it's not my
Yeah.
mom's." Like it was intense.
Wow.
It would, yeah. I mean, I was very emotional and
What was the trigger? Like, what do you remember what was being
thinking about my mom dying.
just thinking about it?
Yeah, it was not fun. Like to sit down and
That's
face
so
that
sweet.
reality. It's, and
Yeah.
that's you talk about bringing out the human element. Like, yes, I'm a lawyer.
So now when people sob in front of you, you're like, I totally get it.
Totally
You
get
have a
it.
lot of Kleenex at the office.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I tell them, like, I avoid thinking about my own
Yep.
death and estate planning
Okay.
just as much as you do. Now, I work in it. I've done a lot, death doula training, etc., to welcome that discomfort and wade
Mm-hmm.
into that space a little more.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just as human as anyone else, and these topics bring some heavy emotions.
When I worked on mine, I felt a little level of depressing because,
Mhm.
and I thought I was 38 when I was working on it, and I really wanted, I knew that I wanted to take my business in a way that served a community of people that were downsizing and thinking about,
Mhm.
thinking more with the end in mind, but also people who have a parent who has passed, so and I just thought that it was important for me, and I'm a single woman.
Mhm.
So it was just what happens to things when I go, but
Mhm.
um yeah, completely healthy.
Mhm.
Um I was like, if I am this young, this generally healthy, this clear-headed about why I'm doing this, and I still am feeling a little weird about it, I understand why, gosh, once you get the diagnosis
Mhm.
or once you get to an age that feels closer to the end, it's even more heavy.
So, yes, working with someone, we work with a lot of clients who are coming in because they're starting to have kids. They have
Mhm.
little kids. They're healthy, they're excited, they're motivating factor for doing their estate planning is they're growing their family and they're having a baby,
Mhm.
and that's like these very positive things. That's a very, very different meeting than someone who just got a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. And I mean, I say the same thing to
I can't
people
imagine that.
as an attorney. Like, I like working on my health care directive. I like thinking about what I would want at my funeral. And then I say, talk to me after I have a serious medical concern. It'll change. Like, it's a
Mhm.
very different beast, right?
Mhm.
But
A
even,
hypothetical
yeah,
is very different than
yeah,
when you're facing it.
totally.
Have you found people's hypothetical answers change
Uh-huh.
when, so that do they call you after they've done something perfectly healthy and now they're facing it? They're like, "Rachel,
Hmm.
no, 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 never mind. I need now the day has come and that idea that was rosy to me, I don't want that to happen."
So, yes. And I'm going to give an example. It's actually a little reverse. So, I had this guy that I helped with his healthcare directive, and he had all these details. And there was one part in the healthcare directive where he said, if I am at the end of life, I only want to be kept alive, or have all things done to keep me alive if I'm going to have a life worth living. And a life worth living to me means I can take care of myself. I know everyone around me. I can fully engage in conversation. I mean, he described a standard of life that I'm not sure I meet every day, right? Like, I was like, whoa, okay. Very high level, right?
Do you ever just marathon Netflix? Yeah, like
Yeah, but right, right. I'm like,
like
I
every
don't
day I can walk 5 miles.
I can't fully engage with everyone around me at all, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, a couple years later, he reaches out, says, "I need to come in. I want to update my documents." And one thing he updated was his healthcare directive, and he changed it. And he said, "A life worth living to me means I can feel sunshine on my face."
Oh,
And I was like,
I
"Oh
will
my god,
cry. Did you cry? That's so
uh-huh."
beautiful.
He had had a near-death experience, and he remembers laying there and just being so filled with joy that he could feel the
Oh,
sun shining on his face. And I was like, that is so fascinating. And, if I sat here and thought long enough, I could probably think of an example of a client where the opposite happened because it's so
okay.
different for all of us, But that's what's empowering about
Yeah.
having these documents is there isn't a right or wrong. I didn't walk away from that instance with that client saying, "Oh, my standard of living should be I can feel the sunshine." No, that's not true for me right
That's
now.
gonna stick with me.
I know.
I have like I'm not the most emotional of people, and I have a little layer of water behind
Mhm.
above my eye. That's
Mhm.
really not that I'm gonna go change my healthcare directive because of it, but I love I love that ability to say, in theory, and if I'm gonna role play this scenario, this is what I think is how I'm gonna be. And then to be able to say, hey, life happened.
Mhm.
I feel otherwise. And I think that really speaks to your offering like home organizing. I always say,
Mhm.
like, this is the best I thought I could do today. This is not perfect. We can make it better. I'll never do the same thing twice,
Mhm.
but I'm happy to come back and do your closet again when
Mhm.
you need it, when you shift a size, when
Yes.
but it's like this idea that finality, like to take away the idea that signing on a line with an attorney
Mhm.
present and saying witnessed by this and this is what happens, it's final for now.
Yeah.
It's a document that gives clarity at this moment in time, but
Mhm.
it can be adjusted, it can be altered, there can be an amendment or
Mhm.
17.
Well, and sometimes that looking at how things are now to kinda bounce a little back, when I was at that meeting with my mom, she was very, very emotional because at that time, uh, she was estranged from one of my brothers. He wasn't talking to anyone in the family at that time, and my younger brother would be okay with me sharing this. He's talked about it on a show on AM 950 with me. He was struggling with addiction and mental health. And so sitting down to talk to a lawyer, she had to really kind of stare that in the face and make some decisions. And I think part of her delaying doing her estate planning was having to sit and look at how things were at that time. And we had that conversation of, my mom was like, "Well, do I do this? Do I do that? Um, what do you think about that?" And by the way, I'm sitting there going, "Ask the attorney, ask the attorney." I don't want any
Mhm,
input. But what was a common theme was, you can come back and change this in a month.
mhm,
But if people can, one, the planning is important, right?
mhm.
But even taking it away from the legal a little bit, which I tend to do because what really makes me passionate about this work is more about the human stuff, right?
As the Google reviews.
Yeah.
I mean, I was gonna read the Google reviews. They're glowing. I mean, people
Mhm.
just it's like, is this really just an estate law firm? Like an elder law? Like this is what she has to offer, and they're all like so thrilled
Mhm.
to talk about it.
Well, because what's so cool about these conversations, it happened when I did my death doula training. I was led through an exercise and you were kind of role playing with other people in the training. And I had to pretend that I knew I was going to die at the end of the year, or, around thereabouts. And the question was, are there any conversations that you haven't had?
Mm,
And there was one that I hadn't had, and I made that phone call that weekend.
mm.
And, I've had clients come in where they're estranged from a daughter, and, we don't I don't dive into personal stuff, right? And ask why. And, I'm not a therapist.
Yeah, we're like, I never thought about estate attorneys. I thought I was closer to a hairstylist, how you kind of
Yeah.
get everybody's, but I
Yeah.
think you, me, and hairstylists,
You're
yeah, we
right.
probably learn a lot about people pretty
Yeah.
quick.
Well, this
Yeah.
client came in and he was estranged from his daughter, and he offered a little information, and he basically said, "Well, my wife got Alzheimer's and she stopped coming around." And I said, "That is really hard." And I shared an experience that I had with someone I knew who had Alzheimer's and a relative who stopped coming around. And what I learned from that was that is not how the relative who stopped seeing the person with Alzheimer's, that isn't how he wanted to remember that person. And it was too painful for him. And I kind of shared that.
With like heart daggers
I know.
today.
And so I just shared that with him, and he was kind of a gruff guy, and he went,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
And by the way, when he came into my office, he was disinheriting her. And before he signed his will, he changed it. And then, and so like you see these really cool things happen when people pause and they let themselves go into that discomfort of those topics.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about legal planning, but there's so much wrapped into it, which is what makes it a really rewarding area of law to practice. It can seem dry, and sometimes the drafting, it is, right? It's still legal work.
That's what I think of legal stuff. I went to DePaul and I worked for their attorneys at the general counsel during undergrad. And I thought I was going to be an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of made it their pet mission to talk me out of it.
Oh.
Well, I organized a lot of real estate files. And I was like, it is a lot of, like, I'm not into all the words and the words being the right words and having to read them all. I can barely get through my book club books once a month. I'm listening 2 times audio. It's like all those words that go into your documents, it's.
I mean, you have to nerd out a little over that. Like, I definitely enjoy that piece.
I'm glad there are people like you.
Yes.
Who did not get deterred.
But that's not what fuels me to work 90-hour weeks some weeks, right? It's the human stuff and the planning. Mm-hmm.
We have a kind of script, but I'm going to go off it. You're welcome, listeners. It's fascinating. I want to go backward to death doula because you and I have talked about this and I know what that is, but I'm sure there's a few people out there who are like, wait, did she say death doula?
Yeah,
I mean, we've heard of birth doulas and that's not even, that's kind of like a companion thing you get in the process of having a baby. You can have somebody alongside you to guide the process of the birth and be there to bring a life into this world with a specialized care. That's my definition of the day.
Yeah.
What is a death doula?
Same definition, only death.
I forgot what I said, so you're going to have to redefine.
Make it back.
Well, it's bringing with care into this world.
It's the person who's there to support and hold space and help someone and witness someone at end of life, at and through their end of life transition. There's a lot of things that stuck with me in death doula training, which I did my death doula training in 2020. I'm actually doing it again in April this year. I'm going to up it, do it again.
Because we love learning.
I haven't done it for a few years, and I'm putting all the attorneys in my firm are doing death doula training this year.
Wow.
And so I'm taking it with them. Yeah, it was one of my goals was to have a law firm where all the attorneys are also trained death doulas. Now, we don't work doing it. We're lawyers. And
you said you've only volunteered.
I've volunteered doing vigil sitting. Okay. But when I did death doula training, I did it for my personally. I did it a few months after my dad died. Because I was with my dad when he passed and I was learning what happens when a person passes away and what it looks like. And I was learning all of this information and having that experience while I was with my dad dying. And I thought, this is a really inconvenient time for me to be learning this for the first time. And I left that experience very angry and feeling like I had been kind of robbed. I wish I had been more prepared. And so I did death doula training. And after the training, I started lawyering very, very differently. And I started having conversations differently. And I started hearing what clients were saying to me differently and being able to kind of just be more human and more connected. And that's rewarding for me. And so the law firm shifted that way.
A lot in the healthcare directive conversations then, or throughout?
It can, yes. Sometimes with terminal patients, a lot of the skills from death doula training come up when there's a lot of family dynamic, because it's really heavy emotion and it's being able to see that, be in that with someone, maybe ground them if they're
Hmm.
feeling overwhelmed, and just kind of honor what they're experiencing and not bulldozing through it, you know?
So I've read, I think, a book on the topic, and I think I have read a fiction where a character was a death doula. But my understanding of the position is that once someone knows they have a terminal illness,
Mhm.
that they are approaching the end of their life,
Mhm.
you they can contact a service provider,
Mhm.
a firm that has death doulas, or somebody
Yep.
who has it on their own private
Mhm.
um, private business, and contract this person to take on the death with them.
Yeah.
And to so I understand that that might be in the form of creature comforts, and
Mhm.
being available to, and I think it seems like everything is kind of negotiated differently as far as how frequently you're there, how
Yep. And what
present.
you want.
Mhm.
Um, it just kind of it can be really tailored, and different death doulas practice very differently. We actually, our law firm contracts with a death doula, and we provide complimentary grief coaching to clients through her. Her name's Michelle Colling, but she's a grief coach. She can educate on death. She can. I did an experience with her. It's called a living funeral, which was not what I thought it was going to be. You basically go through a meditative process with her where you learn about your terminal illness. She guides you through your body shutting down and you passing, and you write a final letter. I mean, it was incredible, like transformative. I did a living funeral with a woman named Nina Gurton. She's another really cool death doula in Minnesota, and she did the guided process with aromatherapy and I mean, it was just transformative. So there's a
I
cool.
I feel like I'm in the know about a few things around
Yeah.
this topic. Like I'm having you here as our expert, but I don't feel like I'm living under a rock and my mind is blown.
Well, there's a cool. I told you about this group, but I'll share it for sake of the listeners. There's a cool group in Minnesota called the Minnesota Death Collaborative.
Yep.
I'm a member. I think I'm the only lawyer member. Most members are funeral providers, death doulas, social workers, hospice, like more that direct death care. But Minnesota Death Collaborative has really cool events, really cool education, and it's a good place to find professionals if
Okay.
someone's looking to hire someone. But I can tell you, I tell people all the time, if I got even with the work I've done and how much I've ventured into this world, which by some standards isn't a lot, by others it is a lot, right? Uh, the
I think you're
first thing,
miles in. Yeah.
well, the first thing I would do is hire a death doula. One thing they said in death doula training that stuck with me is you never look away. So a death doula is someone who's going to be with you, and they are always going to witness what's happening. There were times when I was with my dad that I had to look away.
Mm,
I couldn't be with him
I
in
get
some of those
that.
moments where an end of life doula is really making that commitment and that vow to be there. It can be very, very intense work, as you might imagine.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, in the organizing world, I get into people's family dynamics pretty often, whether
Mhm.
it's, under the same roof. That's most frequent, relationship dynamics, family dynamics, parenting. You hear all sorts of stories about
Mhm.
other people. Um, but I can only imagine how those family dynamics, like from your time as an estate attorney, when you do that and you recognize those dynamics kind of in a, how do we want this to play out when we're not
Mhm.
here to manage the family, manage the
Mhm.
children, manage our
Mhm.
relationship with the kids, and now they'll be left to everything on their own, or
Yeah.
who knows, but then to like you say, not look away, to witness family dynamics, because in the fiction book I read, I believe it was that one, where it kind of, the doula would witness a moment and then be the person that the woman dying could talk to about it and
Mhm.
process with and say,
Mhm.
because they both witnessed it together, they were part of it, and you can't go to the people involved and kind of unpack it, and it's like you are able to be a peace bringer for the person passing, to kind of reflect on some of these interesting dynamics surrounding their life that they're leaving behind.
Yeah.
It's really a neat.
And where to circle it back to like the estate planning piece.
Thank you.
No, you don't.
Thank you for getting us there.
Well, this is such a good segue because
I could look at my questions.
No. And when I've done a number of radio shows, I do podcasts, right? And a lot of times the questions I get are like, what do I need to know about this? How do you do this? And it's very like educational and learning all the things. And how I try to support clients is less on the like what and the how and more on why. Like we can sit and talk about what is a power of attorney, how is it impacted, et cetera, et cetera. Some people might be interested in that information. Some might be like, well, I didn't get a law degree for a reason. I don't need to know those specifics, but it's more of, well, if I'm going to bite this off and I'm going to, like, why am I doing this? It seems dumb just so some assets can pass to my kids. And I will be the first person to say, like, that is the least it's about.
Right.
It is when these documents are in place, how I phrase it is if you're taking them out and blowing the dust off them, there has been an accident, someone is sick, someone has lost mental capacity, or someone has died. And the two attorneys that I run into who will say things like, all of my clients are crazy, all of my clients are, divorce and probate. And the two things those types of law have in common is loss and grief.
Something went wrong.
And someone's grieving a loss.
Mm-hmm.
And having been through grief myself, I mean, thank God my dad had documents that we didn't have to talk about some really important, touchy things because I was using about every ounce of energy I had to just emotionally regulate my grief and my overwhelm and my sadness.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty edgy. I came really close to saying some really hurtful things to my brother. And I have an amazing gift of self-awareness and I can observe, thank goodness,
Yeah.
because there was a moment when we were planning my dad's funeral and we were talking about the obituary and I got very angry about something and I almost said something very, very hurtful and very unnecessary and very unkind to my younger brother. And I remember sitting in that moment and going, oh my gosh, because I'm not like that normally,
Mhm.
right? But I was just so hurting and so like raw and human in that moment that, you know, and my we have a blended family and I have a stepmom. And she came in and said, well, do you want to see your dad's trust? Do you want to know how things are? And I absolutely did not want to talk about that with her when I was in that emotional state. And I got to say, no, I don't need to see that. That's already been completed. You're the trustee. You can let me know what I need to know. We didn't have to figure it out together because I'm not confident that I would have shown up at my best to figure it out together. We were given an amazing amount of space to grieve. When I called my stepmom, I could be checking in on how she's doing, not asking about what's going on with property and bank accounts.
Mm-hmm.
When my dad had Alzheimer's, he had a healthcare directive and power of attorney. My stepmom was able to step in and help with things when she needed to. We had a healthcare directive we could use, and we needed to use it when he was dying to get support and advocate for his comfort care. That got
Mhm.
pulled out. I mean, it was 3 pieces of paper that made a massive difference in his end of life.
I think this is so, it just shows what happens behind the scenes of death.
Mhm.
From and your ability to honor death from such different angles, I think, is what gets all of those glowing reviews, and that you have a team that you're investing in everyone being
Mhm.
trained in this way, because it is, I can feel it, just sitting with you. It's like, this is so, this runs through every bone in your body. This is who
Mhm.
you are. You embody this. This is not a gimmick for an advertising thing and say, oh, yeah, I care. It's like, no, you really care. But what I think is coming across for me is, we really are talking about the people left behind. And we really,
Mhm.
and those people left behind, when you think about it as death and the loved ones and, sorry for your loss and, oh, best wishes and thoughts and prayers. It's like all those pleasantries are there and all that, like, how are you getting along with that brother that you haven't for 3 decades? Like,
Mhm.
how are you doing managing that tendency that you usually go toward when
Mhm.
things get stressful?
Yep.
How how are you doing going to work every day? If you aren't able to take time off work, if your job
Mhm.
is, the fogginess that goes through someone's brain when they're
Mhm.
going, that's what you're mentioning, you're not your best self. And it's kind of like those, there, like memes or things of, at a gym, and they show this person, maybe like the skinniest person in the room is battling with an eating problem,
Mhm.
and this person over here, is um just fought with their wife this morning on their way in,
Mhm.
or like they do it from the bird's eye perspective of cars. And just when
Yeah.
you think of, who you're honking at,
Yep.
it's like, I have a little sticker on my car that says, I hope something good happens to you today.
Mhm.
And I do. And I also hope that if I accidentally don't drive that well, people are, smiling instead of like honking.
Yep.
But, it's for them to read. But what you're putting on is that that REM song, like Everybody Hurts, it's like everybody's in this,
Mhm.
and everybody, like what I talk about is, if you're in this, you one day won't be.
Mhm.
But who are you leaving behind, and
Mhm.
who's on your team of life, and if you're all on the same team and you want to do well, it's like, if you get injured, if you get taken out of the game, how can you keep your team doing
Mhm.
well? How can you keep rooting them on? And rather than, I did an estate clear out. We did so many estate sales with this one because it was just the family dynamic worked well to see things leave through a sale,
Mm.
and through it going to somebody else. It wasn't
Mhm.
as exciting to just donate or dump. But there were so many people who come to estate sales
Mhm.
who go to every estate sale. It's like
Yeah.
this crowd of people that love an estate sale, and I love most of them. But some, it gets to people talking because they're like, "Gosh, there's so much stuff here," like,
Mhm.
wow. And it's like, there is. And it would get people saying, like, because they knew it was connected to a passing, and that the family was part of it, that the son was outside and running it with me. And um there was a lot of people talking about, yeah, I'm trying really hard to work through this stuff so that I don't leave this for my kids,
Mm.
and then there were people who were like, yeah, over my dead body, they can deal with it, leave it
Mhm.
for them. It was interesting to me because I'm of the variety that, like, I don't wanna die, but when I do, I hope that people delight in going through my stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I imagine them going through my house. Like, I get her holiday and it's all labeled and in
Yeah.
beautiful
Yeah.
boxes, like, "Oh, I'll go through her clothes," and, like,
Mhm.
I want them to have fun rather than spend, just, "Gosh, this is so much work." But
Yeah.
it's like, so I'm on the physical side of that. But it's interesting how some people approach it as like, "Yeah, not my problem. I won't have to worry about it." But
Mhm.
do you want your family to be fighting when you're not here to referee? Do you want your family, do you want your
Yeah.
kids to be burdened and go to work and do their jobs, also having to figure out probate? And we're going to get into nitty gritty, like specifically in the future. I think this is just really to set that tone for establishing the comfort around the conversation.
Mhm.
But that to me is what you're really presenting, is this visual of who's in the room, who's at my house when the funeral is finished,
Mhm.
who's in that attorney's office. Because I had talked to my dad last week about funeral plans, and it just was something I overlooked. Most wills are not read till well after the funeral. It's not about
Mhm.
what you want at your funeral.
Right.
That's a prearrangement with the funeral home.
Yep.
It's what you want with your life, with
Yeah.
everything that you've amassed
Well,
during
and
your
it
life.
and it gives people the authority and like a leg to stand on to manage things. And I think another what can be intimidating in having these conversations is fear of the unknown. And it seems very, very complicated. And to a degree, it is. However, setting your family up to have some support, to have foundation, to give some ease can be relatively simple. I had a gentleman call me a couple months ago, and he called me on I had done wills for he and his wife, healthcare directive, power of attorney, and transfer on death deed on the house. Pretty darn straightforward, relatively inexpensive. And his wife got sick. She got put on hospice. She died pretty quickly. And he called me on a Friday morning and he said, they don't think she's going to make it through the weekend. I need you to call me back today because I need to know what I need to be working on. And I say it was one of my favorite phone calls. It was a hard phone call. It certainly wasn't fun and cheery, but I got to call him and say, your focus this weekend is to be with your wife and your family.
You get to hold her hand.
Yeah. I was like,
That's
you're
it.
good.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, should I be doing anything Monday? I said, no. And I said, I'm going to make a note on my calendar. If we don't hear from you in this period of time, we'll reach out. But I'm like, your planning is in place. You don't need to worry about anything this weekend. You don't have to be talking to attorneys in the hours leading up. And by the way, we've done deathbed will signings. And I'm always so grateful that we're able to help people get documents done in the 9th hour. And I also always am standing in that room being like, this sucks.
I wish I didn't have to be here.
I
wish
wish
this
they
wasn't part
didn't
of
have
this.
to have me here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an honor for me, right? Like I'm, but I'm just like, oh man, this is the last 24, 48, 72 hours you're having with your loved one and you have a lawyer you just met here with you. It's just.
The one thing I really want to make sure one question I'd like to know is legal clutter, because we've talked a lot. I think that we have definitely inspired some people to call you or call back their estate attorney and get this started. But what about if somebody's like, I've got it. It's in a drawer. I did it 20 years ago. I'm good. You've talked about like how that could actually work against you. Like maybe you have a power of attorney of someone you're not talking to anymore.
Yeah.
Like what is like a worst case scenario? We'll end our big discussion on this kind of daunting note before we close out on a positive. But
Yeah.
what could go wrong if you have like the legal clutter aspect?
If there's conflicting documents or documents that got signed, put away, and they weren't signed correctly. I've seen those. People have clauses.
Like that it's just it's void. If it's not signed correctly, it's just like, well, that's cute.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've had people that they've called our office and they're like, my dad did a power of attorney 15 years ago. They're telling us we can't use it. We need to sign a new one, but he has Alzheimer's. And it's like, well, you don't have a power of attorney.
It's almost like get your annual and get your get your power of attorney just re-signed in some way.
Or just look at it. I mean, I had someone come in once. They called the office and they said, I need to redo all my estate planning. I said, okay. And they said, we have a will, but we did it in the 70s. And I said, well, why don't you just bring it in with you? I said, bring it in. We'll look at it. Depending what you need to change. Yeah, maybe we'll do a new one, but maybe we'll also do a codicil, an amendment to it. And no kidding, the will was fine.
Wow.
It was. I reviewed it.
How respectable of you to just say, well, we're good.
Yeah, I like my license, and I like having a good reputation and living life with integrity, right? But now most of the time, if wills are that old, something has to be changed or we're updating it. But theirs was actually fine, and I think they maybe updated their healthcare directive or something. But it never hurts to just read through them. I read through my own documents, and inevitably, there's something I put in there about one of my dogs or whatever that I go, oh, I kind of forgot I put that.
Yeah. Because
out of sight, out of mind,
Right.
You want to get it done, and then I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about my poor dogs without me, So.
On that super sad note, let's take a quick break and we'll come back and wrap it up. Rachel, thank you so much for being here. This is Rachel Schromen and Colleen Waterston with Sorting Through Life. We will be right back. All right, welcome back. Rachel, thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to keep diving into this and keep humanizing this legal process of estate planning. I just, your empathy for what you do exudes, and in your stories and in your practice, and I think that for people to be able to spend, you know, 6 hours in the time ahead, to spend that time hearing you, and I just think what a great way to mentally prepare themselves for the process
Mhm.
of estate planning. And I look forward to diving deeper into some of the topics that, are less exciting and making
Mhm.
them exciting. But
Mhm.
I think today what I feel is such a, wall removed between, oh, I gotta go to the attorney. This like I gotta
Mhm.
I'm sure it's like a big fancy office. I probably should dress that. It's just like, oh,
Mhm.
an attorney's a person who's got a lot of understanding and,
Mhm.
has seen a lot.
Mhm.
You've seen a lot. And I'm just excited to be able to have this opportunity to curate a platform for people to learn from you
Mhm.
and to grow the conversation, um, with that in mind. But if people take away one thing from today, what would you like them to do? What's one thing that would be helpful for them from an estate planning perspective?
Just one thing. We talked about so
Or 2 or
much.
3,
Oh,
I
2 or 3,
know.
okay.
You've got
I,
2
uh,
minutes.
I would say the big takeaways, at least at this, like, where we're laying the foundation, is understanding that estate planning isn't just about stuff. It's not just about money and who gets what. There's so much more emotional depth and protection and planning that comes around the family. I think also having, if people can have in the back of their mind that estate planning and having these conversations doesn't have to be intimidating, it doesn't have to be super complicated, and it doesn't have to be super expensive, that they should feel empowered when they meet with an attorney, because from my viewpoint, an attorney's job is to empower a client by educating them on what their options are, and then the client ultimately chooses. And an attorney should be working to learn what's important to the client with their estate planning, what their goals are, and identify the most efficient and cost-effective way to achieve them with, legal documents and planning. While the conversations, they can bring up a lot and they can be very scary or intimidating to wade into, knowing that there's other resources that exist that can help with that. That's a big reason we started offering grief coaching. It's a big reason I'm involved in MNDC. Sometimes things get stirred up for clients that aren't legal, that I'm not the right person to help with, but we can connect them and
To the
they can
home
get
organizer.
to the home organizer. Yes. Yeah.
Circling back.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I'm so glad that you're here. So looking forward to what's next. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. We will be back with more,
Mhm.
and here every Sunday at noon on Sorting Through Life with Colleen Waterston on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Take care.